Hello everybody, I am co-founder and director of AV, as you just heard. My initial activism that I engaged in was online, obviously you know how this works, you do vegan posts, you end up arguing with people in the comments. I was also arguing with everybody in everybody else's posts. I was arguing with everybody in the comment section of every vegan post that I could find. And that's initially how I sharpened my fangs. But then I got out onto the streets and started doing volunteering. A lot of people ask me when I went vegan, and I actually don't remember. I don't remember the day, I don't remember the month. I even struggle with the year, to be honest. The reason for that is because I didn't really feel vegan until I was active, and I remember exactly when I got active. So the first thing I did on the streets was a silent protest where I held signs and I was standing up against the ag-gag laws. In Australia specifically, the ag-gag laws, for those of you who don't know, basically silence activists from going into animal exploitation establishments, buildings where animals are exploited and capturing what's going on. That was ruled out at some point in Australia, and that affects our work in some way with AV because we actually show the footage on screen, so we need activists to be breaking into places and getting footage like that. That was the first thing I did, and it was frustrating. I remember leaving that protest angry because there were people that walked past talking shit, and I felt like I didn't have the ability to say anything back to them because it was supposed to be a silent protest, and that's how it went. So no one was supposed to talk. And then I started volunteering with Animal Liberation Victoria, a local organisation, and I started initially just helping out on their sanctuary, cleaning up poo and delivering pamphlets for them, and just anything that they needed really, I would do. Then I did a couple of outreach demonstrations with them. We did something called pay-per-view, which you see something similar happening now in WTF with the watch for 3 minutes to get a prize idea. Back then, what we were doing was pay-per-view, so we would pay you $2 to watch a 4-minute clip. And I have my feelings about that, but I ended up moving into other forms of activism. And then I started AV, essentially, in April of 2016, and since then, as you heard in my intro, I've done over 30,000 outreach interactions personally. I've done over 1,100 cubes, over 8,000 conversions. I've now facilitated over 35 workshops, and I've accrued over 20 million views. Anonymous with Voices started in April 2016 in Melbourne. It was started by me and also Asal Alamdari. Okay, so we started the organization initially with the goal in mind, and that goal was to be an abolitionist vegan activism organization. To put it into one line at the end there, our mission is creating vegan activists that are the most effective at creating vegan activists. We take an abolitionist stance on all forms of animal exploitation at the hands of humans without any compromise, so we do not spend time talking about welfarism reform. We do not talk about reducitarianism. We do not talk about anything that essentially disrespects the victims. The original definition of veganism, raise your hand if you don't know who Leslie Cross is. Cool. And this is an important thing to touch on because a lot of people don't even know what the original definition of veganism is. We ask people now as part of our protocol if you know what the original definition of veganism is, and most people, even vegans that we ask this question to, actually don't know what it is. They say something along the lines of, you don't eat meat, you don't eat dairy products, you don't eat eggs, so they think it's a diet, and they think it's a restrictive diet. But the original definition of veganism was the doctrine that man should live without exploiting animals. In 1949, Leslie Cross pointed out that the society lacked a definition of veganism, and he suggested the principle of emancipation of animals from exploitation by man, later clarified as to seek an end to the use of animals by man for food, commodities, work, hunting, vivisection, and by all other uses involving exploitation of animal life by man. So obviously that's outdated language at this point. No one says doctrine or man in that way. So what we have done is simply modernized the definition, the ethical principle, some might argue moral principle, I'm here for those debates, that humans should live without exploiting other animals. I think it's as simple as that. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. And I want to point out that the word should is used in the original definition. And the reason that that word is there is because should implies a justice issue. When there's a should involved, that means there's a good and a bad, and therefore you should do the good thing. Right? So should literally touches on the fact that this is a justice movement. And it also means that it's not just about you, it's about all humans, which implies that being vegan is also a position of activism. It's not about just passively consuming vegan products and services. Veganism is a movement. The society declared its objective to end the exploitation of animals by man. The movement crystallized into something unmistakable, not a dietary variation, not a welfare reform, but a principle of justice and liberation. So if you are not active and you're vegan, I would urge you to reconnect to what this is all about. Veganism is not about love or compassion, it's about justice. It's not loving to be vegan. You don't even have to love animals necessarily. There are many animals I don't want around me. There are animals I love more than others. There are some I don't like. But guess what? That doesn't give me the right to exploit them. Just like if someone hates you, they think you're the worst person on earth, they have no right to exploit you, to strip your rights away from you just because they don't like you or even hate you. Same thing applies with non-human animals. So the approach that we have at AV is not about playing political or sales games with people. We've tried it. We've also tried the softer approach, where we ask for much less than an abolitionist position. And it's actually not the most effective thing to do in our experience. At this point, AV does have the most experience in terms of street outreach, because we've done it in more cities around the world, and we've done more cubes than I think any other street outreach program. We've done over 25,000 cubes around the world in over 1,000 cities. And so, based on our experience, we're here to tell you that honesty has actually worked the best for us. Pure honesty. Veganism has nothing to do with human health, or another way of saying human health is human rights. A lot of people think that you're not engaging with, you may think you're not engaging in a human rights discussion when you tell people to eat lentils instead of steak. But when you have that conversation with people, you are actually opening up a human rights conversation, because it's your right to pursue well-being. So when you start talking about the benefits that humans get out of being vegan, you're now actually promoting human rights, not veganism. You may think that you're hooking people into veganism, but in fact what you're doing is promoting human supremacism even further. Same thing with environment. If you talk about environmental points in order to hook people into veganism, most people are not thinking about giraffes and gorillas and elephants. They're thinking about how this impacts humans, because humans also live in the environment, not just other animals. Because yes, I know what the counter-argument is, that other animals live in the environment, but humans are the ones who are predominantly controlling the planet and its inhabitants. So it actually affects humans in a significant way. And that's why when you talk to other humans about environmental points in order to hook them into veganism, you're actually engaging in a human rights conversation in some way. At least what you're doing is promoting human supremacism in some way. Because like I said, they don't care about wild animals. If you want them to focus on wild animals, then just talk about the wild animals. Don't talk about soil and air and water. Talk about the animals, the individuals that you're there representing. This is also not about a reduction of suffering, because that leads you down a slippery slope, right? If you want to reduce suffering and that's your goal, you will end up driving yourself insane, because where is the line drawn exactly? And there are some people that have gone too far with this idea of reducing suffering, and you know, I don't want to, there's one thing I want to say right now, but I don't want to say it because it might be a trigger. But there are some people that take this too far. Let's just leave it at that. People take this way too far and they end up reducing suffering in their lives to the greatest extent. This can lead you to really insane positions, like you being a monk out in the jungle and you give up all of your material items and you don't have a smartphone and you don't engage in the world, basically. You don't contribute. You're not here with us actually fighting this fight. You'll just disappear into doing nothing, essentially. So that's what veganism will lead you to if that's what you think veganism is. But it's not that. This is about ending exploitation. So when people say, you still harm insects when you farm broccoli, yes, but we're not exploiting insects. And that's what veganism is about. So that's as easy as it is to address those kinds of arguments once you understand what the real definition is. So can you just raise your hand if you're not active? Be honest. If you're not active in some way, shape, or form. Anyone? Okay, cool. There's 2 of you. So my question to you is, do you agree that animals deserve to be defended? You don't have to answer right now, but in your head, I want you to think about this. Because if you do agree that animals deserve to be defended, then you need to be doing something. You can't just leave this to the small percentage of people who actually fight for animals. We have around 200 million vegans on the planet. We have maybe 1% of that are active. And we have maybe 1% of the active vegans that are on the same page. The rest are fighting amongst themselves. So that's how desperately we need you fighting for the animals, at least with a clear vegan message. And if you think that someone else is going to do it, then it will never get done. And if you think that you don't need to fight for animals, that they deserve to be defended, perhaps you agree with that, but you don't need to be the one that defends them, then, again, revisit and reconnect the meaning of what it is to be vegan. Because you label yourself vegan, you identify as vegan, I'm sure you align with the principle. So, is it really about being a passive consumer of products and services? Or is it about speaking up for the victims in the same way that you would want to be spoken up for if you were in their position? Because this is a justice movement, and if you're not moving, then you're not really part of the movement. If you're not pushing the vegan movement forward, and buying products and services does not actually push the movement forward, then what are you doing? Please join the force. This has, I think, been the most hammered home point throughout this conference. So since I'm doing the last talk here today, let me just make sure that is hammered well and truly into all of your minds. Please join the force. For whoever's listening to me right now, this is exactly what we need. Active vegans. They're the only ones that the animals have to rely on. No one else. So join your local chapter and become an organizer if there is no local chapter with AV or whoever it is that you resonate with the most, but just be active, because being active is a moral obligation. There are so many vegans out there that think that living by example is a principled position, is an effective thing to do. How many times do you actually engage in discussions with people about veganism unless you're doing activism? In your personal life, if you just lead by example, which I don't even know what that means, by the way, because what are you doing? You're just living your life? What example are you leading by being a silent vegan? You're promoting the idea that other vegans should be silent, they should never talk about this. And essentially, like I said before, it doesn't push the vegan movement forward. And most non-active vegans that I have ever met in the last 13 years that I've been vegan are the ones who talk shit about active vegans. They work against active vegans. They say that active vegans are too pushy, too extreme, they're making veganism look bad, they push people away from veganism. This is what they do and this is what they say. And if this is what is going to be said and done by non-active vegans, then that's even more of a reason for you to stop being a non-active vegan and just join the team. Get on board with actually fighting for justice. The biggest injustice in the world is what's happening to animals at the hands of humans. Fight against that. If you don't have purpose in your life, give yourself purpose by fighting for the animals. It's the biggest, most purposeful thing that you could do on this planet. There isn't a minute that I've spent fighting for the animals that I regret. The only thing I ever regret was giving my power away to people during outreach interactions by getting angry and letting their poison seep into my soul. But I always learn from those experiences, so it's actually still not even really a regret. So let me just go over these core principles that we have with AV, because these things will change the game for you. A lot of people ask me for advice on how to do activism or what to say when someone gives you a certain argument, or sometimes they criticize us and say, how do you know that you're really that successful? Well, first of all, when it comes to outreach, you don't always have the ability to know. In fact, you rarely find out if someone's actually changed and followed up after the fact. You know, they come to a cube, they join the cube, that's how you know that they took it seriously. You get a message from them, they follow you on social media, they're checking your stories, they communicate with you. This is how you can track people on the individual level to see if they've changed. But largely, you will not know. And we can track data as best as we can, but it's largely inaccurate information unless you have private investigators involved. And, you know, this data is really just a better estimate. It's not entirely accurate information. So what we have decided to do is not be so outcome focused at AV, but instead to be process driven. So how good are we at doing the work that we do? Right? And focusing on what we can control instead of trying to attach our success to measurements that are actually not even real. They're not real metrics that we can gather. Like anything short of private investigators, in my view, is not really accurate enough for me to attach myself to it. So I've detached myself completely. I'm process driven in the sense that I just want to focus on 4 things, which is what you say, how you say it, who you say it to, and how long you say it. If you focus on mastering those 4 things, I guarantee you it will give you peace of mind, but also it will make you a stronger activist in general, because you're putting your power into things that you can control, and you're not giving your power away to things you can't. So when it comes to what you say, we have 3 core principles. The first one is holding non-vegans accountable, but also holding vegans accountable. Because again, like I said before, if you're not active and you're vegan, then you don't get the point. And you need to be active. I could stress that point ad nauseum here today. In our society today, ample information exists on the subjugation of animals. What is lacking in this society is accountability, okay? There is no one in society that will hold you accountable for not being vegan. That's why we need activists actually doing that uncomfortable, confronting work. A lot of people avoid holding non-vegans accountable because you think that it's not your place to do that. Maybe you think that that pushes people away. Maybe you're just too scared to do that because of the uncomfortable nature of confronting people. But it's actually the most effective thing to do. And it's a principle, it's a core principle that we have, because in society, there is enough information that exists already with documentaries, YouTube videos, websites. It's endless how much information you can find if you just look for it. And nowadays with AV, when we ask people, have you seen this footage before? Or if we ever ask that question, we used to ask that a lot more than we do now. Most people will say, yeah, I have seen something like this before. So nowadays, this is more exposed than it was ever before. And this means that they've either seen what's happening to animals, or they know about it in some way, shape, or form, or they've heard about veganism before. By now, this is more common. So we need to adjust to the climate of the times that we're in here. And we need to stop thinking that just giving people information is enough, because it's not. It's actually an extremely weak goal to just go out there and verbally leaflet to people and just tell them pieces of information about how old chickens are when they get killed, or the baby boys getting taken away from the mothers in the dairy industry, or whatever it is that you currently do. Stop spitting factoids at people and actually get to the root of the discussion, which is you're currently not vegan and you have victims, and I'm here to represent them. You need to change. You need to stop doing what you're doing. You need to be vegan also. And it has to be about the individual that you're talking to, because people love to distract away from personal accountability and talk about anything and everything other than themselves being accountable. They'll talk about the governments needing to change. They'll talk about corporations needing to change. They'll talk about the entire human species and hide behind that. But you're not going to change everybody. So when they play these games, this is showing you exactly why it's important for you to be holding people accountable on the individual level, because it's literally never going to happen otherwise. So don't squander that opportunity that you have to do that by just talking about pieces of information with people that becomes food for thought, not a call for action. The second core principle is a victim's perspective. The victim's perspective, right? The victims that you're out there representing, because any other perspective is irrelevant. My perspective doesn't matter, yours doesn't matter, because the victim's perspective tells you everything. Whenever somebody gives you an excuse, whether it's plants have feelings, circle of life, God though, whatever it is, mirror their excuse back to them and put them in the victim's position. Does this excuse sound acceptable to you when you're the victim? What if I had my own faith was, telling me, my belief tells me that it's okay to subjugate you and to dominate you to death, for you to be my property. You're actually only here for me. And so anybody who's reasonable or even somewhat open-minded should understand how absurd their argument is when you do that. So you don't even really need to have the most perfect counter-argument. So my workshops over time actually have changed a lot, because it used to be about dealing with certain arguments and giving people answers to these things. How do you deal with plants though? And then I would give them my response. But now it's always victim's position, because victim's position is the most effective way of pointing out the absurdity of their arguments and having them realize that what they're saying is completely unjustified. We place ourselves in the victim's position in order to acutely grasp the injustice regarding any injustice. So we do this in the cases of slavery of humans, of rape, of child abuse victims. We do this across the board. We don't care about what the rapist thought or felt as much as we do about the victim. The rape victim tells you everything you need to know. So that's how we measure how severe or urgent the injustice is. And the same thing should be done with the most victimized. Because if we're not doing that, how are we going to get people to really connect to that? You have to place yourself in the victim's position in order to see them as individuals as well. And that's the whole point of vegan outreach, is to get them to understand that you're talking about victims who are individuals here, just like you. So I'm not sure if there's anything else for me to say on this, but yeah, put them in the victim's position, but also speak in the same way that you would want to be represented if you were in the victim's position. And whenever you get lost in an outreach interaction, in the heat of the moment, when you find yourself not knowing what to say next, just anchor yourself back into that perspective, and it will put you where you need to be. And the third core principle is a call to action, because again, a lot of people will say, thank you for giving me something to consider. Thank you for giving me something to think about. But this is not merely food for thought. That's not why we're out there. Again, an incredibly weak goal. If we do that, then we're not actually putting the urgency that needs to be spoken about when it comes to this injustice front and center in the conversation. This is a call to action because that's what you would need if you were in the victim's position. So it's not enough for people to simply agree with the principle of veganism. I mean, surprise, surprise, people agree that we should respect animals. But they actually need to take immediate action. They need to stop being the reason that animals are disrespected in the worst possible ways. They need to stop exploiting animals. They need to live vegan, and they also need to speak up. That can happen instantly as well. People will say a lot to us that this takes time. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But we have thousands of people in droves who become vegan and active immediately. In fact, right now, AV has the best hit rate of people joining the Cube immediately than it's ever had before. So in the organization right now, we have more people on the spot jumping in the Cube who were not vegan before. When they came over to the Cube, before we spoke to them, they were not vegan. Now they're jumping in the Cube. And during One Dom Month and One Damn Ode, our two biggest campaigns this year, One Dom Month was 31 days in front of Cologne Cathedral, and One Damn Ode followed that with 8 straight days on Dam Square in Amsterdam. So over that roughly 41 or 42 days of work, we had an average of 10 people jumping in the Cube every day. So that should help you to understand that when people say, it can't just happen right now, like it's a process, it takes time, I can't just change right now. Yes, you can, and you should. And there are countless other people that are doing it, so what's different about you? It's just an excuse. And you shouldn't be playing into that excuse. As kind and as genuine as some people seem when they say this, you have to be above this. You have to see the bigger picture. You have to remember that this is just an excuse, and it's completely unacceptable and distasteful to use this excuse in the face of this injustice. Knowing that it's so easy for you to stop being the reason that the largest atrocity in the world is happening, and yet you want to take your time. And by the way, once you leave an outreach interaction with a real vegan activist, you just go back into the world where you'll be comforted, where you'll feel more complacent, where nobody will hold you accountable ever. And so you will have every reason, everything in every direction pushing you to just stay non-vegan. So it's not a process, actually. The process of going vegan is a decision. It's a mindset shift, a switch that you need to switch now. And so in that conversation, that's where the process should happen, not after it. So if you think that it's okay to say, well, fine, you're agreeing to reduce your consumption of animals, like you're going to eat less animals from now, okay, you know what? I validate that. That's a good thing. So in a few weeks, maybe you'll be vegan. If you start playing this game, all you're doing is giving people absolution for not being vegan. That's all you're doing. You're comforting people to not change immediately and to not see this for what it is, an urgent and severe injustice. So the last core principle that we have is a call to action, and we never ever end outreach interactions that get, as long as we can get all the way through our points, we never end the outreach interaction without asking them to change. And like I said, that means to not only be vegan, but to be vegan activist. So the 4 things that I mentioned before, the first thing was what you say. So when it comes to what you're saying, I would urge you to stick to tried and true principles. When I started doing outreach, I wanted to do this in the best possible way. I learned a lot from Gary Yourofsky's work, and I figured out the things that he was doing in his communication. I figured out sort of a foundation and core things that I think were the most important. These are the 3 core things that we just covered. Holding people accountable and putting them in the victim's position. I always found it most effective when he did that in his speeches. And I also figured out that, he had a call to action involved. He mentioned that this is something you need to do now. And so you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to try and figure out how to do this or what works best necessarily, because we've already put in so many hours within AV as an organization. Gary had already put in like 60,000 people that he's spoken to. So all this work, all these years of laborious work has already been done. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. What you can do is help us to master it. You can join the force and you can help us with getting better. Sharpen the tools that we already have. Because like I said, the whole idea of addressing an injustice is based on very simple things, like holding people accountable and putting them in the victim's position. It's not complicated, right? This is extremely simple. So join us and help us to become even sharper, even stronger, and more effective. That's my ask to you. When it comes to what you say, avoid distractions during interactions. Like if people bring up abortion though, don't play their game and say, well, my position is that, don't even answer the question. I'm not going to talk about abortion right now. I'm here talking about the animals, your victims. That's who I want to talk about. That's who I want to focus on. And control the conversation, because there's always one entity in each interaction that is actually controlling the conversation. Make sure that's you, because if it's not you, it's them, guaranteed. It's always one entity that is actually in control. And the reason why you need to be in control of the conversation is because otherwise you'll get distracted with things like abortion or some other talking point that actually takes away from what's happening to the animals. And if you're not in control of the conversation, you will also you will not find it would be incredibly difficult for you to actually carry out those 3 core principles that we just covered. And yeah, I think I covered all of that. So make sure that you're guiding the conversation and they're not. The second thing is how you say it. Be assertive. You know, some people say, how do you start conversations? You just say hello. Make eye contact and say hello. Also, what I don't like seeing is when activists are meek, you know, like, hello, and thinking that this is going to warm people up to a discussion, or sometimes even like surprising people by coming from around the sides or the back behind them and then, you know, popping up in front of them, hello, you know. So if you want to improve your chances of having a free-flowing conversation from the beginning, make eye contact, say hello, and then start your conversation. Be assertive and be confident. You have every reason to be, because you have the truth on your side. And honesty is the best policy in AV, because, like I said before, the approach itself is based on pure honesty. I've tried playing all of the political games, pandering, compromising on the message because I'm focusing on being liked as a primary focus. I've tried all these things before. We have tried all these things before, all over the world. It doesn't work as effectively as just being honest and direct with people. And it's the most appropriate way to represent the victims. It actually earns respect. Isn't that what we want? Isn't that when you try to pander and you compromise and you focus on being liked, aren't you trying to earn respect from the person? Isn't that why you're doing it? But my reminder to you is that the world works the opposite way. When you stop caring so much about people liking you and respecting you, what happens? People actually start liking you and respecting you. That's how the world works. If you're focusing on being liked and respected as a primary focus, especially when you're an activist, and it's obvious that your goal is to turn other people vegan, that's why you're standing out on the streets or you're doing your activism in whichever way you do it, they're going to lose respect for you. Because it's clear that your objective is not as important as you being liked and respected by other humans. And they know deep down in the back of their minds that they're actually responsible. So they're the victimizer, and you're focusing on being liked by the victimizer even more than you are about being direct. You're focused on that more than being direct on behalf of the victims and representing them in the same way that you would want to be represented. So if you really want to earn respect, then be direct, be honest, tell the truth. There's nothing wrong with that. We need to stop thinking that that's, you know, some of you might even think that's like somewhat violent to do, to just tell people the truth, right? But it's in fact the most loving and respectful thing that you can do for someone, is to tell them the truth. Especially when it comes to this. Some people tell us not to show children the truth. To not show children the footage or to tell them the truth like we would with adults. Obviously, we would use different language with children. Otherwise, they wouldn't understand words like exploitation. But they actually understand the truth fine. They want it as well. They're thirsting for it. And the thing with children is that the direct approach works with them because they are also direct. You notice how kids will just say, "You're fat." And nobody's going to get angry at them, but that's how they talk. They just say what's on their minds. So they do appreciate honest language when you communicate directly to them as well. But think about this. If we don't do that, if we don't tell children the truth, then they're going to be force-fed injustice by their parents. That's more abusive than it is for them to not hear the truth in this regard. So you either show them the truth on screens and tell them the truth with your words, or they get forced injustice down their throats and their souls are tarnished forever. Every one of you, I guarantee, I don't even have to ask you the question, wishes you would have been vegan sooner, right? Right. Clear as day. So that's why you should be direct with people. That's why you should get the message across and be truthful, because they will also have this same wish that you have one day. They will also say the same thing. They wish they were vegan sooner. So don't cheat people out of that because you don't want to be direct, because you think it's more effective based on some intellectual post you read, some article that philosophizes to death about what the most effective approach is. You know? We're the ones doing the work out here on the streets. Join us. Find out for yourself what's the most effective approach. You'll see it if you come out to one of these big campaigns we do, I guarantee you, by the time you leave one of these campaigns, you will also be sure of this. You just need to trust the process. Once you do it for yourself, then you'll know it to be true. That's even me standing up here and saying what I'm saying will not resonate with you 100% until you get out there and do it yourself. That's why all of this stuff is fine and well for me to talk about all these theories and all these points, but this was figured out on the streets. None of this was put together and then we went out onto the streets. It didn't happen that way. It happened the other way around. Our first action on the streets was terrible compared to what it is now. You know, the structure, there was no structure. The outreach protocol, we had no protocol. You know, we just figured everything out as we went. And it's the same thing with Gary's work. He figured out how to speak to people after doing tons of lectures, thousands of lectures. This is what it takes. The third thing is who you say it to. So, you know, a lot of people ask me how to get through to certain people or how to convince people when they say certain things. But my most common response is, who are you talking to? Right? And this is something I actually say to people on the streets a lot too. Who are you? I want to know who you are, because it's your character that determines whether you'll change or not, whether you see this for what it is or not. And so focus on people that are reachable, because most people, I would say, perhaps most of the people out there that you outreach are not reachable. I hate to break it to you. Humans are scumbags. However, the good news is that a lot of people will actually change. Otherwise, AV wouldn't be successful with the work that we're doing. We wouldn't even be around if there weren't enough people out there that will change. So the good news is that not everybody is a scumbag. And you can convince a lot of people. You just have to be out there doing the work. And this is a numbers game. So a lot of the times we're out there, we're having really bad days. You sometimes feel like you're barely even able to get through to one person and get them to take it seriously. Some days are like that. But then when you're part of a cube of truth, the awesome thing about that is that you're there as a team. You're not there as an individual. So when you look around you and you see everybody else doing the work and they're getting numbers, you're a part of that. And also, they become learning experiences. All of these interactions with people that aren't reachable are learning experiences for those. Once you do reach people that are reachable, once you have those interactions with people that actually get it, you'll be sharper when it comes to those people. So accept that you will not get through to everybody. Accept that deep within yourself. Remove attachment from that, because there's no point in being attached to that. It actually drags you down. And in order to stay empowered doing this work, you have to realize that, again, this is a numbers game, and you're going to reach as many people as you can reach. You can say everything perfectly that you need to say, but if you say it to the wrong person, it won't land. And on the flip side, you can say things imperfectly to the person that's ready to change, and they'll change. They'll not only change, they'll become a vegan activist on the spot. So it's good to master these things. Master what you say, how you say it, who you say it to, and how long you say it. Master these things, because when you do reach people that are reachable, you'll not only get through to them and get them to go vegan, you can potentially turn them into the best vegan activists we have on the planet. That's why it's good to master these things. And we have a 3 strikes you're out policy. This is a good way of assessing whether the person that you're talking to is actually reachable or not. So let's say they give you 3 excuses, you address these 3 excuses, but each time you give them a response, they don't seem to care about what your response is. They're not even listening to your response. They're just wanting to throw shit at you to see if it lands, and they're wanting to have a shit fight. So when they do this, after 3 attempts of addressing their excuses, if they're not listening, just move on. And that's the most powerful statement you can make to someone who's not willing to listen, because at least one vegan in their lives was not willing to put up with their bullshit, and that's a strong position to leave with them. And how often is someone going to hold them accountable in their lives when it comes to this? Probably never after you. So that's a strong statement to leave with them. That walk away usually leads people to chase after you. So you walk away, they usually go, hang on a second, I've got one last thing I want to say. Or they go up to another activist and start wanting to argue with them at the Cubes, for example. And we're so unified at the Cubes now that if you're following protocol, and most people do, then you will actually say to that person in that moment, I'm sure my colleague left that conversation for a good reason, goodbye. And they also walk away. And this is a really powerful, unified statement to leave with people on behalf of the animals. So the 3 strikes you're out policy is solid. Sometimes people get a double strike. From the beginning, they'll start trolling, for example, and you can tell that it's not going to go anywhere. For example, they don't answer your question. You know, at the beginning of the interaction, we ask, how do you feel about humans exploiting other animals? If they answer that question with, I love meat, then first of all, they're not answering the question. Second of all, they're showing you that they're more interested in trolling. So you can ask the question again to see if their answer changes. But if it doesn't, that's, I would say, a double strike at that point. So this is how we maneuver through the process of controlling who you say what you're saying to. And there are plenty of people that want to address this, that are thirsty for this, that will actually change. And that's another reason why you should walk away from people who aren't reachable, because otherwise you are giving your power away to people, and you should conserve your energy, which you have a finite amount of, for people who you can reach. You know, we do have to get real about the fact that our time and energy, especially our mental health, is limited. And the thing about the last point I just made about who you're saying this to and the 3 strikes you're out policy is that this is actually part of our mental health care plan that we have baked into our protocol. A lot of people ask us what we do for mental health at AV. This is one of them. We give you a surefire protocol to follow so that you don't end up banging your head up against a wall. And then how long you're saying what you're saying is important too, because you know, if you're spending a lot of time with trolls, that's not a good look. You're not sending a very good message on behalf of the animals when you're doing that. If you're wasting your time with people by entertaining arguments and you're implying that this is actually complicated by doing this, this is not complicated. This is actually extremely simple. So the more you entertain ridiculous debates with people, the more you're implying that this is some kind of debate that's complex, and you're also implying that justice is up for debate, but justice is not up for debate, actually. It should not be. So act that way, in the way that you communicate. Carry yourself in that exact way. Don't get stuck with trolls because your time matters. A lot of people will actually bait you into discussions by trolling. The more you do this work, the better you get at seeing what a troll talks like, what they think like, what they act like. So keep it simple. If you respect animals, then act like it. That's what we're asking people to do. People act like this is some big thing that we're asking them to do. Oh my God, I'm going to change my whole life. You're just choosing different things at the grocery store. You're making different choices when you go to a restaurant, or when you buy clothing or cosmetics, or when you want to go out with your friends and family. Instead of going to the zoo, go somewhere else. This is not difficult. This is actually extremely simple. Do not let other non-vegans and also vegans gaslight you into thinking that it's complicated, because it's not. I understand the severity and the actual how big the issue is. I understand how big the issue is, that people don't see this in the same way they see human rights issues, but that's even more of an argument for why we need to be speaking with such ferocity, why we need to be acting with such urgency and speaking so directly. The flowchart, let's just go through this quickly. This is something we put together to help guide activists through the conversations. This is not a script, so we don't want you to go through this like a robot. We want you to read the room and to pay attention to nuances. I don't know how to teach you how to read the room, though. That's something you need to have, a desire to acquire as a skill, if you don't already have that skill. If you're socially lacking these skills, then this is even more of a reason for you to get out and practice, to actually just put in the work of doing thousands of conversations. You will get better at reading the room, I promise you. There are different ways of saying the same thing. So, for example, we use the word preventing on step number 6. But you can use the word stopping. You also can put your own personality into this. You don't have to sound exactly like I sound. And for example, if someone at the beginning of the interaction is expressing emotions, they seem sad or upset at the footage that they're watching, there's no point in you saying to them, how does this make you feel? How do you feel about humans exploiting other animals? Because it's clear that they're upset. So you should, in that case, say, hey, I can see that you're feeling upset by humans exploiting other animals. I can see that you're angry about humans exploiting other animals. And then you can just move into the next step, the second step. So this should give you an idea on what you should be doing with this flowchart. And you can use your best judgment and common sense on how to maneuver through the steps. I do this a lot. I will sometimes move around, but I'll always come back. I won't actually end up skipping any of the steps as best as I can. Sometimes I do, but yeah, I'll go through them actually. I'll go through the steps first. Okay, so the first step is hi, hello, eye contact. How do you feel about humans exploiting other animals? And then the second step is, do you agree that humans should be respecting other animals? Okay? Most people will say yes to this. Surprise, surprise, right? Then step number 3 is, can you truly respect other animals if you're exploiting them for their flesh, their breast milk, their eggs, or for any other purpose? Is that respect? Most people will say, no, that's disrespect. Or if they go, well, you can respect them if you do it the right way, and then they go into welfare. This is another reason why welfare should not be in the vegan movement, because we should not be entertaining these kinds of talking points that keep coming up in our outreach interactions. They think there's a better way to do this. That's exactly what we need to be addressing by saying, no, there is actually no better way to do this. If you were in the victim's position, would you accept being exploited less or less often? Or would you need your exploitation to end? It's not hard to understand. Step number 4, do you know what the original definition of veganism is? This is a beautiful question. This is the kind of question I wish was asked to me when I wasn't vegan. Do you know what the original definition of veganism is? So even if they thought they knew what veganism is, the fact that we dropped that word original in there has their mind open, usually. They're like, no, tell me what it is. So then we explain it. It's the ethical principle that humans should live without exploiting other animals, as defined in 1951. Then I give them an extended explanation here. This is what helps them to understand this even further. I explain it by simply saying that this means that you stop viewing other animals as existing for your selfish purposes, and instead you acknowledge that they exist for their own reasons. So do you agree that they do not exist as your property, that they're not your objects? Or do you agree, that they exist for their own reasons? Right? And they will usually say yes to that. They will usually understand the point and agree to that. That means they're agreeing to the principle of veganism in the clearest way. All right, and then step number 5 is, do you know what the number 1 advantage is of living vegan? This used to say benefit. We're always updating our language and our questions and the points we're making. We're always working on this. So it used to be number 1 benefit. We've changed it to advantage. We found that to land a little bit better, because this is not about human benefits, like I said before. So do you know what the number 1 advantage is of living vegan? Most people will say health or the environment, which proves that we don't need to be educating people about health and environment points as much as we think we do. So when they say health and environment, we should be saying, look, it can be better for your health and the environment as far as I understand it. However, this is about the animals, so the number 1 advantage for the animals, for your victims, is that they'll no longer be disrespected and exploited because of you. And the number 1 advantage for you as an individual is that when you say that you respect animals, you will no longer be a hypocrite. You'll be telling the truth. Most people get this. They're not offended by this. You might think me saying this out loud is going to offend people if you haven't done the work out on the streets with us. I'm telling you that most people by far accept this and agree, completely agree. And if you're shy about calling people hypocrites when it comes to this, I would ask you to stop cheating people out of being vegan. Because a lot of the hardcore activists that I know actually were called out for their hypocrisy, specifically that. And that was one of the catalysts for them to become vegan. Gary Yourofsky is one of them. And I could go through a long list of people that are really strong activists today who actually had their hypocrisy called out in a direct way. And that's why they changed, actually. So stop cheating people out of that transformation, because on the other end of you saying these uncomfortable things, what could happen is that person could become the best vegan activist on the planet. And step number 6, do you feel that there's anything preventing you from being vegan? This is where we draw out any of the excuses. So at this point they might say, well, I don't know if I can get all of my nutrients, or whatever it is that they say. Make sure that you assess whether they're being genuine about this or not. And the best test question is, are you open to being wrong about this? Or if that wasn't a problem, would you go vegan immediately? So if they say protein though, if protein wasn't a problem, would you go vegan right now? And if they don't say yes, then it's not a genuine concern. They're just making an excuse up. So if it is a genuine concern and they say, yes, I just need to figure out the protein thing, great, I'll work with you on that. You can take your phone out, use ChatGPT, you can find out which foods have the most protein in them. I can even help you to figure this out. And I can also give you a bunch of recipes, etc. But that how conversation on how to be vegan should be only focused on this much in the interaction. Because that can be a distraction, and it's also a mockery of how serious this is to focus on how so much. Because why is far more important than how. The why factor is actually what's keeping people from being vegan, it's not how. So talk that way. You should be communicating this as the case, because that's what it is. That's what's really happening. People aren't actually struggling to they're not using their phones perplexed with how to get protein on a plant-based diet. They're just not using their phones and they're not trying to figure it out. That's the problem. But if they have a driver, if you have a will, you have a way, you've heard that saying. If you have a driver, then you'll figure it out. So empower them with what tools they can use, ChatGPT, Google, Reddit, whatever else you need in order to find recipes, to find information, nutritional websites, PCRM, whatever else. Give them the information. We already have enough information that we give them on our cards at the end of the interaction at Cubes. But focus on why in your interaction far more. All right. Step number 7. If you were in the position of the victims, how fast would you want this injustice to end? So this is the one time in the outreach interaction in the flowchart where we actually put them in the victim's position, because we have to do that. It's one of our core principles, but you may actually end up doing this multiple times throughout the interaction. You may need to do it more than once, especially if they give you excuses. All right, and usually people will say, well, obviously I would like this to end immediately. And so step number 8 would be, how many more animals from now on should be exploited because of you? Should it be 0? Or should it be more than 0? And again, most people will say 0 because it's absolutely absurd to say anything more than 0. So, vegan from now, and most people will actually say, I'll try. I'll think about it. Maybe. This is what most people will say. So that non-committal conclusion means you need to do more work. They may be understanding, but they don't truly get how severe. They need more understanding. They need to truly connect to how urgent this is. So when they say, I'll think about it, maybe, then what we should do is remind them that we've already established that there's nothing significant that's actually stopping them from being vegan right now. We've already covered all the things that we went through the excuses, I've addressed them. So there's nothing actually significantly stopping you, nothing valid that's stopping you. And also put them in the victim's position. If you were in the victim's position, would you accept anything less than affirmative and immediate action to be taken? Especially when you know that your victimizers can change right now. More importantly, they should change right now. Would you accept anything less? Is there any excuse that you would accept from them to not change right now? No, absolutely, I would need change right now. Okay, great. So vegan from now. This is how you get them over the line. Okay, step number 10, once you get them over the line, is, do you agree that they deserve to be defended by humans? Like what I'm doing, like what we're doing. Do you agree that this should be happening on their behalf? Most people will say yes at this point in the interaction. How could you say anything other than yes? Great, then don't be a passive and silent vegan. Speak up for the victims in the same way that you would want to be spoken up for if you were in their position. If you've got 5 minutes, you're welcome to join this art installation we're doing, the Cube of Truth. You can jump inside, wear a mask and hold a screen. Would you like to do that? You can stand for the animals right now. Offer them the opportunity to be a part of a platform that empowers them. And a lot of the times people say yes, the worst that they'll say is no. So this is how we get people to be active as well. So that's the flowchart, 1 through 10. And if they don't give you excuses or much pushback, this will get you from hello to vegan activist on the spot within 3 minutes. And so this is directed at vegans. So if you get someone who says, I'm vegan, then this is what you should run through, these 4 questions or 4 points. The first point is, do you know what the original definition of veganism is? Because most vegans don't actually know it. Once you have shared that with them, you also clarify that this is not about a diet, or it's not about lifestyles. It's not about environmentalism, and it's not about health. It's about justice for animals. They deserve one movement dedicated to them. Once you've explained that, step number 2, do you feel like it's okay think, feel. We're still figuring out which one's better. Do you feel like it's okay to not be vegan? Okay, now this is an important question because this will address any excuses that they have about, like a lot of people say personal choice. A lot of vegans are so complacent that they think, well, other people have the right to not be vegan. It's fine if they want to not be vegan. So then we would address the excuses from the victim's position. This is how we do it with all excuses. So if you were in the victim's position, would you accept that other people have the right to exploit you, but certain people shouldn't? What kind of a mentality is this? Step number 3, do you agree that the animals deserve to be defended? And if you were in their position, would you want vegans to speak up or remain passive? So speaking up is the least that we could do and that we should be doing. You know, we have said in this movement for a long time, I think, that veganism is the least you could do. In fact, vegan activism is also the least you could do, because being vegan and also saying something to people is not the most you can do, actually. It's the least you can do. And step number 4 is, why not join us now? Like I just covered before, offer them a platform immediately. Ask them to come like right now and join us. Forget, who cares what they're wearing? They may not be dressed in all black, but get them to join us now. It's an incredibly potent thing that you can impart on people, because that experience that they're going to have at a Cube of Truth is incredibly rare. They're not going to have that experience anywhere else in the world at any point ever in their lives. And if they do say yes, then you would send them to an organizer and we would brief them. So for those of you who are listening to this, watching this, because this is being recorded, and you know, I'm thinking about people who are watching this who aren't here with us right now. And for those of you who said that you're not active, you know, again, I just want to ask you, like, what's holding you back? You know, we have the tools, we have the resources in this movement to empower you. You can actually become the most powerful vegan activist you can be now. It's never been a better time in the vegan movement. In 2025, we currently have, in the organization that I'm running, AV, we currently have the best team in the world. The community aspect, the camaraderie, the unified mission that we have has never been stronger. So what are you doing? Join us. It's never been better for you to join us. We have online masterclasses. We've got outreach videos from other activists online that you can watch to keep you sharp and to keep you inspired. And you get plenty of support from local organizers. For those of you here in Scotland, we have a team in Edinburgh and Glasgow. You know, you have a great team. You have great teams here that can work with you, and the organizers are awesome. So they're very professional at dealing with any of your concerns. If you have any issues, any need for support, anything at all in order to be active with us, to fight with us, we're here for you. And in terms of burnout, I've already addressed the 3 strikes you're out policy, but also the fact that we have the camaraderie and the shared unified mission. You know, these things also should keep you from burning out as well, because we're all going through it together. You don't have to wear the weight on your shoulders only. You know, we're sharing this disgusting atrocity is something that we are addressing together. You don't have to do this solo. If you want to do it solo, then by all means. But, you know, the fact that you can lean on other people in this movement is a great thing that you should be taking advantage of. And if you're not comfortable with doing outreach yet, you can come to Cubes and you can do what we call shadowing, where you listen in on outreach interactions that are happening without being a distraction on the interaction. Or you can be one of the members in the camera crew who record outreach interactions. This is actually an incredibly important role, to be recording content, recording outreach interactions that then become seen by millions of people potentially online. You know, that's what helps us massively. AV's mission is also not just street work, but online work. It's both. We've always been about that since day one. My first ever Cube that I did in Melbourne in April 2016, I had my outreach interactions recorded, and you can actually see that on my YouTube channel. It's always been part of the goal. Another thing you can do is just stand in the Cube. If you're not comfortable doing outreach, just stand in the art installation and be a part of something incredibly powerful. And if you say it's hard and you don't have time, I would ask you to put yourself in the victim's position once more. Because we need people who are brave enough to find solutions. If you can't get to a cube because you just absolutely cannot, then there's other ways that you can support AV or organizations like AV. You can share outreach videos online. You can share the outreach content to your friends and family on social media. You can make posts about veganism on social media. You can donate to AV. You can become a monthly donor. We rely heavily on donations and our merchandise sales. They're really the only ways that we are funded as an organization. You can support us by getting the word out and getting others to join cubes who may be able to if you can't, or at least once a year, make the effort to come to one of these big campaigns we do. We do them in Europe, and we do, I just did a big campaign in London, and that was last weekend, and that was phenomenal. It was a really strong turnout over the weekend. We did a workshop on the Friday night, and then we did 2 cubes over the weekend. Phenomenal. My experience in London over the weekend recently was phenomenal, because the campaigns are getting stronger and stronger. The work is getting better on the ground. So make an effort to be at one of these campaigns that's near you, that's possible for you to join. And there's a QR code for those of you who want to get active with us. This will take you to our landing page that shows you where local chapters are, and you can also become an organizer by going to this link if there is no local chapter. We need more leadership in the vegan movement, so if you think that somebody else needs to step up and become an organizer before you do cubes, why not you do it? Step up. We have leadership across the board in our organization. We have people who are leaders at age 16. And our age limit was actually 18, but we've made exceptions for certain individuals. If we have organizers in places like the Congo, where they're so impoverished that many people say, well, they can't even be vegan. They're actually not only vegan, we've got chapters out there who are vegan activists. They're stepping up. They're organizing cubes in their little towns where there's basically no buildings in sight. I could show you the photos of the places where cubes are being done in Africa. Your jaw will drop. So please don't think that you can't do it or shouldn't do it when there's people all over the world of all ages, of all creeds doing it. We need more leadership in the movement because, again, if you were in the victim's position, that's what you would want. You want leaders stepping up. And so if there's a lack of leadership locally to you, consider being that person who actually steps up. We have a bunch of resources also at activism101.com. That's where you'll find our latest workshop and flowchart. But that's also something that you can just find on our landing page. Just want to end it on that note. Sorry, I couldn't do more questions. So who would like to be the 2 people who asked me a question?
Hey, I think we agree on the role of honesty, succinctness, and assertiveness when it comes to outreach. But how do you feel about memorability? Because I would say that's like an added extra I add on top that I think is really important.
What was the word?
Memorability. As in, they have to remember you after the conversation, so that you live in their head.
What do I think about that?
Yeah, do you think it's a useful tool in outreach?
I don't see that as is it a tool?
Yeah.
How is it a tool?
Because even if they don't change on the day, if they relive the conversation in their head, it will continue to affect them down the line.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but how is it a tool? That's more of a...
I think we as individuals can go out of our way to be memorable. I think the way we speak, the way we make points.
Right, okay, I get what you're saying. Well, yeah, I mean, I've been saying a lot in AV that we shouldn't be intellectualizing with people so much because people don't remember what you say, they remember how they felt about what you say. And I've been saying this a lot, over the years I've been saying we need to get under people's skin. We need to hit them in the gut, hit them in the chest, not necessarily in the head, because the brain is programmed. You know, we've been programmed by society's lies since birth. This is why children are so good to talk to, because they're not as conditioned. But I know this, I don't believe this, I know this to be true, that change actually happens more at the visceral level, and that's why truth is so effective, because it hits you in the chest. It doesn't really hit you in the head so much. So I think we're on the same page about that.
Great talk, Paul. Thank you. How do we handle this scenario so that people are not stopping to have a chat with you at the cube, or they are running away from the conversations, not finishing the conversations? So how do you handle those scenarios?
There was 2 scenarios there. Can you ask me one at a time?
So the first one is if people are not stopping to have a chat with you at the cube.
If there are not enough people for us to engage with, we're sort of standing around and we're struggling to get people to stop. The people who look at the screens while they're walking past are fair game for you to say, hey, hello, how do you feel about humans exploiting animals, as they're walking past? Sometimes they'll stop, but what you should not be doing is actually walking after them. I don't like it when I see activists doing that. Yes, this is urgent, but desperation is not a good thing to... maybe that's the wrong word, but you know what I'm trying to say, right? It's not a good tone to have on behalf of the animals. We do get plenty of people that stop. I've never done a cube here in Scotland before, so I'd have to ask the activists here on like exactly what the dynamic will be. We'll see tomorrow. But generally speaking, what we would do is wait for people to stop. And once they look at the screens, as soon as they start looking at the screens, once they've stopped, it's fair game for us to walk over and say, hello, how do you feel about humans exploiting other animals? So that's that. The other scenario is when people are walking away from the conversation after you've engaged, right? So in that case, let them walk. If they want to keep it short with you, keep it short with them. Obviously try to make your points as best as you can, right? But if they're like, no, I've got to go because I've got a train to catch, ask them the question that you were going to ask, and if they don't answer it because they're running away, let them run away. Because you're not going to get someone to change unless they're open right now in this moment. They just have to be ready and open. Unfortunately, we can't force people to be vegan. And if we could force people to be vegan, my talks and my workshops would be very different. So, does that answer your question now?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. I'd like to also thank those who put this conference together. Can we hear a round of applause for them, please?